Once upon a time, there was a little princess who lived in a castle with her mommy and daddy. I read to Lily, my 5-year-old daughter curled up against my chest like a warm kitten. Her blonde hair smelled like strawberry shampoo and innocence, two things that were becoming increasingly rare in this house. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Where's the dragon, Daddy?" Lily asked, her green eyes wide with anticipation. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, glancing toward the empty driveway through her bedroom window. "Sometimes the dragon looks just like everybody else." It was past 9:30, and Sarah still wasn't home from her third girls' night out this month. My wife had been pulling these disappearing acts with increasing frequency, always with the same excuse. "I need some time with my friends, Ethan. You wouldn't understand." She was right about one thing. I didn't understand. What I did understand was patterns, surveillance, and the subtle art of reading people. 12 years in the Marines, including 3 tours as a sniper, had taught me to notice details that others missed. The way Sarah's phone buzzed at odd hours, how she'd started showering immediately after coming home, the faint scent of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine clinging to her clothes. "Is Mommy coming home tonight?" Lily asked, interrupting my dark thoughts. "Of course she is, Princess. Mommy always comes home." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but Lily didn't need to carry my suspicions. After tucking her in with 3 more stories and a glass of water, I retreated to my home office, a converted garage space where I ran my private security consulting business. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days protecting other people's assets while my own marriage crumbled around me. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and settled into my desk chair, staring at the stack of unpaid bills and client reports. Business had been slow lately, which meant more time at home, which meant more opportunities to notice Sarah's increasingly elaborate deceptions. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Running late. Don't wait up. Love you." Love you. Right. When was the last time she'd said those words to my face instead of hiding behind a screen? I was about to head to bed when I noticed Sarah's iPad charging on the kitchen counter. She'd been glued to that thing for weeks, always angling it away from me, always closing apps when I walked into the room. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before my training kicked in. In the Marines, we called it Reconnaissance. In civilian life, most people called it snooping. I called it survival. Her Messages app was still open, displaying a group chat called Girls Gone Wild with 3 participants: Sarah, her best friend Marla, and someone listed as Rick T. That was odd. Since when did Sarah's girls' nights include men? I scrolled up through the conversation, and my veins turned to ice water. Sarah: "Can't wait to see you tonight." Ethan's reading to Lily, completely clueless, as usual. Rick T: "Your husband sounds like a real Boy Scout. How did you end up with such a boring guy?" Sarah: "Biggest mistake of my life, but not for much longer. Marla's helping me figure out the divorce angle." Marla: "Just make sure you get everything. The house, custody, alimony. Men like Ethan are pushovers. They'll roll over and give in if you push the right buttons." Rick T: "Speaking of pushing buttons, wear that black lingerie set I bought you. I want to peel it off you slowly tonight." Sarah: "You're so bad. I love it. Ethan hasn't touched me in months. He's too busy playing soldier in his little office." The messages continued for several more screens, each one more explicit and cruel than the last. They discussed meeting at Rick's downtown condo, Sarah's plans to accidentally get pregnant to trap me into a bigger alimony settlement, and Marla's advice on hiding assets before filing for divorce. I'd survived roadside bombs, sniper fire, and 3 tours in hell, but reading my wife's casual betrayal felt like taking shrapnel to the chest. The bourbon glass slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor like my marriage. But underneath the hurt and rage, Something else stirred. Something cold and calculating that I hadn't felt since my last mission in Fallujah. Sarah wanted to play games? She had no idea who she was playing with. I took screenshots of every message, uploaded them to a secure cloud drive, and cleaned up the shattered glass. By the time Sarah staggered through the front door at 2 a.m., smelling of perfume and Rick's pricey cologne, I was lying in bed, pretending to sleep. "Ethan?" she whispered, sliding into bed beside me. I didn't respond. Let her think I was the clueless husband she'd described to her lover. Let her think she held all the cards. Tomorrow, I'd start evening the odds. I'd survived Fallujah, but Sarah's group chat was another kind of war zone, one where I intended to be the last man standing. The next morning, Sarah bounced around the kitchen like nothing had happened, humming while she made coffee and scrolled through her phone. Watching her perform this charade of domestic bliss made my skin crawl. "Sleep well?" she asked without looking up from her screen. "Like a baby," I replied, buttering Lily's toast. "How was girls' night?" "Oh, you know how it is. Marla had drama with her ex again. We ended up at that new wine bar downtown until they closed." The lies rolled off her tongue so smoothly, I almost admired the performance. After dropping Lily at kindergarten, I drove straight to the Drunken Fisherman, a dive bar on the wrong side of town, where my old Marine buddy Jake Brennan worked as a private investigator. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was Jake. I found him in his usual corner booth, nursing black coffee and reading case files. Jake looked like what he was, a former Marine who'd seen too much and drank too little to forget it. His weathered face lit up when he saw me approaching. Well, Ethan Cole graces me with his presence. What's the occasion? Finally ready to leave suburban paradise and join me in the real world? "I need your help, Jake. It's about Sarah." His expression sobered immediately. "Ah, shit. I was wondering when this conversation would happen. Sit down and tell Uncle Jake what that pretty wife of yours has been up to." I slid the screenshots across the table. Jake's eyebrows climbed higher with each message he read. "Jesus Christ, Ethan. She's not even trying to be subtle about it. Who's this Rick character?" "That's what I need you to find out. I also need surveillance photos, something that'll hold up if this goes to court." Jake nodded grimly. "Consider it done. But I gotta ask, what's your endgame here? You planning to take the high road and file for divorce like a gentleman? Or are we talking about something more creative?" The question hung in the air between us. In our unit, Jake had been the explosives expert, the guy who solved problems with maximum efficiency and minimum survivors. He understood that sometimes the high road was a luxury you couldn't afford. "Let's start with surveillance," I said carefully. "Then we'll see what options present themselves." Jake grinned, the same expression he'd worn before blowing up insurgent strongholds. "Now you're talking my language. Give me 48 hours. True to his word, Jake called me 2 days later with an address and a time. "Your wife's boyfriend is Richard Travers, real estate developer. Owns half the luxury condos downtown. They're meeting at his place this afternoon, penthouse at the Morrison Building. I'll be in position with a telephoto lens." I spent the rest of the day in my office, pretending to work while my mind raced through possibilities. At 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with the first photos. Sarah, in a red dress I'd never seen before, entering the Morrison Building. Sarah and Rick on his balcony, wine glasses in hand. Sarah in black lingerie, the same set Rick had mentioned in their messages, pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows while Rick kissed her neck. Each image felt like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to study them clinically. Evidence, ammunition, tools for the war I hadn't started but intended to finish. My phone rang while I was examining the photos. Marla's name flashed on the screen, odd since she rarely called me directly. "Ethan? Oh God, I'm so sorry. I meant to text Sarah. Please don't tell her I called you by mistake." "What were you going to tell her, Marla?" Panic crept into her voice. "Nothing important. Just that the dog is out, you know? She's with R. But you didn't hear that from me, okay? The line went silent. I stared at the phone, pieces clicking into place. The dog is out was obviously code for me being away from home, giving Sarah the all clear for her affair. That evening, Sarah waltzed through the door at her usual time, full of stories about shopping and lunch with the girls. I let her spin her web of lies while I helped Lily with her homework and pretended everything was normal. But when Lily was finally asleep, I confronted my wife in the kitchen. "Who's Rick?" Sarah froze, a wine glass halfway to her lips. "What?" "Rick Travers, your boyfriend. The man you've been screwing in his penthouse while I watch our daughter." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're being paranoid, Ethan. This is exactly why I need space. You're suffocating me with your suspicions." Classic gaslighting. Make me question my own sanity instead of addressing her betrayal. But I'd come prepared for this dance. I placed my phone on the kitchen counter and played the slideshow Jake had prepared, dozens of photos set to music, showing Sarah's affair in vivid detail. The final image was a close-up of her face in Rick's window, eyes closed in ecstasy, completely lost in the moment. Sarah's mask finally slipped. The loving wife disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You had me followed? You sick bastard? What kind of man spies on his own wife?" "The kind whose wife is planning to ruin him in divorce court while sleeping with her boyfriend in a downtown penthouse." She laughed bitterly. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Playing detective, gathering your little evidence? Well, congratulations, Ethan. You've won the prize. You get to know exactly how much I despise this pathetic life we've built together." "What about Lily?" "What about her? She'll be better off without watching her father turn into a bitter, paranoid shell of a man. At least Rick knows how to live." The venom in her voice was breathtaking. This wasn't just an affair. It was complete contempt for everything we'd shared. "You'll regret this, Ethan," she continued, grabbing her purse and keys. "You have no idea what you've just started." She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, and smiled for the first time in weeks. "Regret?" I said to the empty house. "Sweetheart, I haven't even started." 3 nights later, I was reading Lily her bedtime story when everything went sideways. We'd just gotten to the part where the princess defeats the dragon when I heard the distinctive sound of my back door being forced open, splintering wood, followed by hushed voices. "Stay very quiet, princess," I whispered to Lily, my marine training kicking in instantly. "We're going to play a game, okay? Close your eyes and count to 100. No matter what you hear, keep counting." Lily nodded, her eyes wide but trusting. I kissed her forehead and moved to the bedroom door, listening carefully. 2 voices, both male, moving through my kitchen toward the living room. "Told you this was the wrong address," one of them hissed. "Boss said 1247 Maple Street. This is 1247 Maple Street." "Yeah, but he said the guy would be alone. There's kid stuff everywhere." "Doesn't matter now. We're here. They've seen us. Can't leave witnesses." My veins ran cold. These weren't burglars. They were here to send a message, and they were willing to hurt my daughter to do it. I moved through my house like a ghost, using skills I'd hoped never to need again. The first intruder was examining family photos on the mantel, his back to the hallway. He was big, probably 6'2", wearing a ski mask and carrying a baseball bat. I came up behind him silent as a shadow and wrapped my arm around his throat, applying pressure to his carotid artery. He dropped like a sack of cement, unconscious, but alive. The second man was in the kitchen, rifling through drawers. He heard his partner fall and spun around, raising a crowbar. "Where are you, asshole? We just want to talk." I picked up one of Lily's wooden blocks from the floor and threw it down the hallway in the opposite direction. As he moved toward the sound, I stepped out behind him. "Looking for me?" He swung the crowbar in a vicious arc. I ducked under it and drove my knee into his solar plexus, doubling him over. A quick chop to the back of his neck, and he joined his partner on my kitchen floor. I zip-tied both men with restraints from my security kit and removed their masks. I didn't recognize either face, but I found something interesting in the first man's pocket, a burner phone with recent text messages. Unknown number, 1247 Maple Street. Make sure Cole gets the message. Scare him good, but don't leave any marks. We need this to look random. Response: what if he doesn't scare easy? Unknown number. Then make sure there are no witnesses. Clean up the whole mess. The timestamp showed the messages were sent 2 hours ago. I photographed everything before calling 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Ethan Cole at 1247 Maple Street. 2 men just broke into my home and threatened to harm me and my 5-year-old daughter. I've subdued them both. I need police and an ambulance. The next hour was chaos. Police cars, paramedics, neighbors gathering on my lawn like vultures. Detective Ray Malone, a tired-looking cop in his 50s, took my statement while crime scene techs processed my kitchen. So let me get this straight, Mr. Cole. 2 armed intruders break into your home, threaten you and your daughter, and you manage to take them both down without a scratch on yourself? I got lucky, I said simply. Lucky. Malone's eyes narrowed. What kind of work did you say you do? Private security consulting, background checks, risk assessment, that sort of thing. And before that? Marines, 12 years. That explained everything and nothing. Malone clearly suspected there was more to the story, but 2 unconscious criminals in my kitchen made it hard to argue with my version of events. The intruders were hauled away in ambulances, both suffering from concussions, but otherwise intact. One of them, Tommy Breslin, had a record of assault and battery. The other, Eddie Vance, specialized in intimidation for hire. After the police left, I tucked Lily back into bed. She'd slept through most of the excitement, waking only when the ambulance siren started. Daddy, were those the bad men? Yes, Princess, but they're gone now. The police took them away. Will they come back? No, sweetheart, they won't be back. I meant it. Whoever had sent them would think twice about involving my daughter again. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Heard about the break-in, taking Lily to stay with my mother for a few days, for her safety. I stared at the message, pieces clicking into place. Sarah shows up to collect our daughter less than an hour after the police leave. How convenient. Another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. Sorry about the mix-up tonight. Won't happen again. I screenshotted both messages and forwarded them to Jake. Then I poured myself a drink and sat in my destroyed kitchen, thinking about the burner phone's message history. Someone wanted me scared. Someone who knew where I lived, knew I had a daughter, and was willing to risk her life to send a message. The question was, who had that kind of reach and that little conscience? My phone rang, Jake's name on the display. You okay, brother? I heard chatter about some excitement at your place. I'm fine. But Jake? I think we need to have another conversation about Rick Travers. Why's that? I looked at the photos of the text messages on my phone, at the splintered door frame, at the zip tie marks on my kitchen floor where 2 men had learned not to threaten my family. Because I think he'd just made this personal. The next morning, I drove to Rick Travers' luxury condo building with a head full of dark thoughts and a toolbox full of possibilities. Sarah had picked up Lily before dawn, claiming she needed to keep our daughter safe from whatever trouble Ethan's gotten himself into. The implication was clear. Somehow this was all my fault. Jake had done his homework on Rick. 38 years old, divorced, drove a silver Porsche 911 that he treated like a religious artifact. Made his money developing luxury condos for rich people who wanted to feel superior to their neighbors. The kind of guy who wore Italian suits and Swiss watches and thought his money made him untouchable. I found the Porsche in the building's underground garage, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a chrome altar to male insecurity. beautiful car. Shame if something happened to it. I worked quickly and quietly, using skills learned in a dozen different war zones. A few pounds of sugar in the gas tank, an old myth, but it would make Rick paranoid about every engine sound. All 4 tires slashed, but carefully, so they'd look like random vandalism. And finally, my signature. A small sticker on the windshield, circular with crosshairs in the center, the kind of thing a sniper might leave behind. The whole operation took less than 10 minutes. By the time Rick discovered the damage, I'd be long gone. My phone buzzed as I drove home. A text from Marla. "Sarah's really upset about last night. She thinks you're losing it, Ethan. Maybe you should talk to someone." I almost laughed. Sarah was upset? She'd sent 2 thugs to threaten my daughter, and she was upset that it didn't go according to plan? I texted back, "Tell Sarah I'm just getting started." That afternoon, I set up surveillance outside Rick's office building, watching him discover his vandalized car through high-powered binoculars. Even from 3 blocks away, I could see his face turn red with rage. He spent 20 minutes on his phone, probably calling police and insurance companies, gesturing wildly at his ruined Porsche. Good. Let him feel helpless for once. My phone rang. Sarah's name on the display. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed before I could say hello. "Rick's car was destroyed last night. He thinks you did it." "Why would I care about Rick's car? I don't even know the man." "Don't play dumb, Ethan. This isn't over." "You're right about that." The line went silent. I smiled and continued watching Rick through my binoculars. He was pacing now, talking to what looked like a police officer, probably filing a report that would go nowhere since vandalism cases rarely got serious attention. That evening, I drove to the Drunken Fisherman to meet Jake. I found him at his usual table, but he wasn't alone. Detective Malone sat across from him, nursing a beer and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Ethan," Malone said as I approached. "Funny running into you here." "Small town," I replied, sliding into the booth beside Jake. "How's the investigation into the break-in going?" "Interesting you should ask. Tommy Breslin and Eddie Vance aren't talking, but we found something curious on that burner phone you mentioned." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh? The number that sent those threatening texts? It's registered to a shell company that's owned by another company, which is owned by a trust, which is managed by a law firm that specializes in keeping rich people's secrets." Sounds complicated. It is, but here's what's really interesting. Someone matching your description was seen in the parking garage at the Morrison building this morning. Same building where your wife's boyfriend lives. Jake shifted uncomfortably beside me. Malone was fishing, trying to connect dots that would turn me from victim to suspect. "I don't know anything about that," I said. "I was home all morning, cleaning up the mess those 2 thugs made of my kitchen." "Right." Malone finished his beer and stood up. "Well, if you think of anything else about last night, give me a call. And Ethan, be careful. Sometimes when you start a war, it's hard to control how it ends." After he left, Jake leaned across the table. "You're playing with fire, brother. Malone's no fool. He knows you're up to something. Let him know. As long as he can't prove anything, I'm just a concerned father protecting his family. And if he can prove something?" I thought about Lily's frightened face when those men broke into our home, about Sarah's casual cruelty, and Rick's assumption that he could intimidate me into submission. "Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." Jake shook his head. "You're starting to sound like the old days. That's not necessarily a good thing." He was right, but I was past caring about good and bad. Sarah and Rick had escalated this conflict the moment they put my daughter at risk. Now they were about to learn what escalation really meant. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off, Cole. This is your only warning." I showed the message to Jake, who whistled low. "They're getting nervous." "Good," I said, typing a response. "They should be." I sent back a single word. "No." Within minutes, my phone rang. An unfamiliar voice, trying to sound tough. You think you're smart, don't you? You have no idea who you're messing with. Actually, I do. You're Rick Travers, real estate developer, drives a silver Porsche that's currently sitting on 4 flat tires. You hired Tommy Breslin and Eddie Vance to scare me, but they got a little too enthusiastic about the job. Now you're panicking because your intimidation tactics didn't work. Silence on the other end. Here's what's going to happen, Rick. You're going to stay away from my family. You're going to end whatever relationship you have with my wife, and you're going to pray that I don't decide you're too much of a threat to ignore. You can't threaten me, he said, but his voice cracked slightly. I'm not threatening you. I'm educating you. There's a difference. I hung up and turned to Jake. Think he got the message? Oh, he got it. Question is, what's he going to do about it? We didn't have to wait long to find out. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Rick and I are taking Lily out of state until you get help. You're not fit to be a father. I stared at the message, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. They wanted to take my daughter. They wanted to remove her from my life because I'd refused to be their victim. That was a mistake. A big one. Jake, I said quietly, how do you feel about a little road trip? He grinned that old familiar grin. Where are we going? To remind some people why you don't mess with a Marine's family. I knew exactly where they'd go. Sarah's family owned a cabin on Lake Winnisquam, about 2 hours north. It was isolated, private, and far enough from civilization that Rick probably felt safe there. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Jake and I drove up separately, him in his beat-up pickup truck, me in a rental car I'd paid for with cash. No point making this easy for Detective Malone if things went sideways. The cabin sat on a wooded lot overlooking the lake, accessible only by a narrow dirt road. Perfect for privacy, terrible for escape routes. I parked half a mile away and hiked through the woods, using night vision goggles to scout the property. Rick's damaged Porsche sat in the driveway next to Sarah's SUV. Lights were on in the main room and I could see figures moving around inside. 3 adults, 1 small child. My daughter was in there, probably confused and scared, wondering why Daddy wasn't coming to tuck her in. That thought made my vision go red around the edges. Jake had positioned himself on the far side of the lake with a high-powered rifle and scope, not to shoot anyone, but to provide overwatch and early warning if things went wrong. We'd done this dance 100 times in Afghanistan. Some things you never forget. I spent an hour rigging the cabin with surprises, motion sensors connected to spotlights, speakers hidden in the trees, wired to broadcast my voice from multiple directions, tripwires that would trigger air horns and flashing strobes. Nothing dangerous, but guaranteed to terrify anyone who didn't know what was coming. At midnight, I was ready. I started with a phone call to the cabin's landline. Rick answered on the 3rd ring, sounding nervous. Having a nice vacation? I asked. Cole? How did you get this number? I know lots of things, Rick. Like how you hired those 2 idiots to break into my house. Like how you and my wife planned to frame me as an unfit father. Like how you thought you could take my daughter and I'd just roll over and accept it. You're crazy. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Tell them how you kidnapped a 5-year-old girl and brought her to an isolated cabin. I'm sure they'll be very understanding. I hung up and activated the first surprise. Spotlights blazed to life all around the cabin, turning night into day. Through my scope, I watched Rick and Sarah scramble away from the windows, probably thinking they were surrounded by police. My voice echoed from speakers hidden in the trees. You have something that belongs to me. Send Lily outside, and maybe we can discuss this like civilized people. Sarah's voice, shrill with panic. Ethan, please. She's just a child. Exactly. She's a child who should be home in her own bed, not caught up in your sick games. I triggered the next sequence. Air horns blared from 3 different directions while strobe lights flashed in the windows. Classic psychological warfare. Overwhelm their senses, make them feel surrounded and helpless. Rick tried to run for his car, but the motion sensors caught him halfway across the driveway. More lights, more noise, my voice booming from the darkness. Going somewhere, Rick? We haven't finished our conversation. He stumbled back toward the cabin, probably soiling himself. Good. Let him feel the fear he'd tried to inflict on my family. The front door opened, and Sarah appeared with Lily in her arms. My daughter was crying, terrified by the lights and noise. "Daddy?" Lily called out into the darkness. "Daddy, where are you?" That broke my heart and focused my rage in equal measure. I stepped out of the tree line, hands visible, moving slowly so I wouldn't spook anyone. "I'm here, Princess. Everything's going to be okay." Sarah clutched Lily tighter. "Stay back, Ethan. I mean it. Give me my daughter, Sarah. This is between you and me." Rick appeared behind her, trying to look brave but failing miserably. "You're outnumbered, Cole. There's 2 of us and 1 of you." I smiled, the same smile I'd worn before eliminating insurgent positions. "Actually, there's 1 of me, 1 of you, and 1 cheating wife who's about to learn what loyalty means. Jake, say hello." A rifle shot cracked across the lake, and the Porsche's rear window exploded. Rick dove for the ground, whimpering. Sarah screamed and nearly dropped Lily. "That was a warning shot," I called out. "The next one won't be." "You're insane!" Sarah shouted. "I'm calling the police." "With what? I jammed all the cell towers within 10 miles, and I cut the landline after our little chat. We're all alone out here, just like you wanted." I walked closer, keeping my hands visible but my posture predatory. "Here's what's going to happen. Sarah, you're going to put Lily in your car and drive home. You're going to file for divorce and accept whatever custody arrangement I'm willing to offer, and you're going to disappear from our lives." "And if I don't?" I gestured toward the lake, where Jake's muzzle flash had originated. "Then my friend over there is going to start taking this personally. He's got a daughter too, Sarah. He doesn't like people who use children as weapons." Rick found his courage from somewhere. "You can't threaten us like this. I've got connections, lawyers." I moved faster than he could react, grabbing him by the throat and lifting him onto his toes. "Your connections didn't help when I destroyed your car. Your lawyers can't protect you out here, and your money means nothing to a man who's got nothing left to lose." I squeezed just hard enough to make my point, then released him. He collapsed, gasping and clutching his throat. "Lily," I said gently, "come to Daddy." My daughter ran to me, wrapping her arms around my legs. I picked her up, holding her close, breathing in that strawberry shampoo scent that meant home and safety and everything worth fighting for. "Sarah, get in your car. Drive home. We'll discuss terms tomorrow." "What about Rick?" I looked at the man who'd tried to steal my family, cowering in the dirt beside his ruined Porsche. "Rick and I need to have a private conversation, man to man." Sarah hesitated, then walked toward her SUV. "This isn't over, Ethan." "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." After she drove away, I turned my attention to Rick. He was trying to stand, still clutching his throat, looking around desperately for an escape route that didn't exist. "Sit down, Rick. Let's talk about what happens next." He sat on the cabin steps like a broken puppet. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something. You came into my life, destroyed my marriage, and threatened my daughter. Those actions have consequences." I pulled out my phone and showed him a video file. "This is security footage from your building's garage, showing me sabotaging your car. I could have sent it to the police, but I didn't. Know why?" He shook his head. "Because I wanted you to know it was me. I wanted you to understand that your money and connections and fancy lawyers can't protect you from someone who's willing to get his hands dirty." I knelt in front of him, close enough that he could see his own fear reflected in my eyes. "You're going to leave town, Rick. Tonight. You're going to transfer your business interests to other people and disappear from our lives completely. If I ever see you again, if you ever contact Sarah again, if you ever even think about my daughter again, I will finish what I started here. You can't make me... I pressed my thumb against his throat, right where I'd grabbed him earlier. He whimpered and tried to pull away. I'm not making you do anything. I'm explaining your options. You can leave voluntarily, or you can leave in a body bag. Your choice. Rick nodded frantically. Okay. I'll go. Just don't hurt me. Smart man. I stood up and walked toward the tree line. Oh, and Rick, next time you want to intimidate someone, make sure they're not better at it than you are. I disappeared into the woods, leaving him alone with his fear and his ruined car and the knowledge that he'd picked a fight with the wrong man. Jake met me at the rendezvous point, grinning like a wolf. Just like old times, brother. Better, I said, thinking of Lily safe in my arms. This time, we were fighting for something that mattered. We drove home in convoy, leaving Rick Travers to contemplate his mistakes in the darkness beside a lake that would forever remind him of the night he learned what real power looked like. Tomorrow, I'd deal with Sarah and the lawyers and the messy business of rebuilding our lives. Tonight, I was just a father who'd protected his family from the monsters that looked like everybody else. The neighborhood block party had been planned for months, but the timing couldn't have been more perfect. 3 days after the lake incident, the entire Maple Street community gathered in Riverside Park for what would become the most memorable social event in the suburb's history. Sarah had returned from the lake changed, quieter, more calculating, but not defeated. She'd spent the intervening days on her phone, whispering with lawyers and plotting her next move. She thought she could still salvage this situation, still find a way to come out on top. She was wrong. I arrived at the block party with Lily, playing the role of concerned single father, while neighbors offered sympathetic looks and casseroles. Word had spread about the break-in, the separation, the troubles in the Cole household. In a community like ours, scandal was currency, and everyone wanted to be close enough to witness the drama firsthand. Sarah appeared fashionably late, dressed in a sundress that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. She'd brought Rick as her date, a bold move that sent whispers rippling through the crowd like wildfire. "Can you believe the nerve?" I heard Mrs. Peterson mutter to her husband. "Bringing her boyfriend to a family event while her husband's right there." Rick looked uncomfortable in his expensive casual wear, constantly scanning the crowd like he expected snipers in the trees. The lake encounter had left its mark on him. Good. Marla arrived shortly after, carrying a covered dish and wearing the expression of someone who knew secrets but wasn't sure which ones were safe to share. She'd been Sarah's co-conspirator from the beginning, but recent events had her questioning her loyalties. I watched the three of them huddled together near the picnic tables, probably planning their public relations strategy. They thought they could control the narrative, paint me as the unstable veteran who'd driven his wife into another man's arms. They had no idea what was coming. At exactly 2 p.m., I stood up from the blanket where Lily and I had been eating sandwiches and walked to the makeshift stage where community announcements were usually made. Someone handed me a microphone, assuming I wanted to thank everyone for their support during my difficult time. "Thank you all for coming out today," I began, my voice carrying across the park. "It's wonderful to see our community come together like this. I wanted to take a moment to share something important with all of you." Sarah's head snapped up from across the park. Rick went pale. Marla dropped her potato salad. "As many of you know, my wife Sarah and I are going through a difficult separation. What you might not know is why." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the portable speaker system the event organizers had set up. "I think it's important that everyone understands the truth about what's been happening in our neighborhood." The first audio file began playing. Sarah's voice, crystal clear through the speakers. "Biggest mistake of my life, but not for much longer. Marla's helping me figure out the divorce angle." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Parents covered their children's ears as Rick's voice joined the conversation. Your husband sounds like a real Boy Scout. How did you end up with such a boring guy? I let the recording play for 30 seconds, long enough to establish the affair, but not long enough to traumatize the kids present. Sarah was pushing through the crowd toward me, her face flushed with rage and embarrassment. "Turn that off!" she screamed. "You have no right!" Actually, I have every right. These are conversations involving my wife, my marriage, and my daughter's future. I think our neighbors deserve to know what kind of people they're dealing with. I played the next file, Marla's voice discussing hiding assets and manipulating custody arrangements. Then the text messages between Sarah and Rick, discussing their plans to accidentally get pregnant to increase alimony payments. The crowd was silent now, watching Sarah and Rick like they were exhibits in a zoo. Mrs. Peterson had her phone out, probably live streaming the whole thing to her Facebook page. But that's not even the worst part, I continued. 3 nights ago, 2 men broke into my home and threatened to hurt me and my 5-year-old daughter. The police found a burner phone on one of the intruders, with messages from someone ordering them to scare Cole and eliminate any witnesses. I played the audio of those text messages, watching Rick's face crumble as his voice echoed across the park. "Make sure Cole gets the message. Scare him good, but don't leave any marks." The crowd erupted. Angry voices, shocked exclamations, someone calling for the police. Rick tried to run, but a group of fathers from the neighborhood blocked his path. "You threatened a child?" Tom Martinez, whose own daughter played with Lily, stepped forward with his fists clenched. "In our neighborhood? It wasn't supposed to happen like that," Rick stammered. "They were just supposed to scare him." By threatening to harm a 5-year-old girl? That's when Marla made her move. She'd been Sarah's closest friend and co-conspirator, but she was also a mother herself. She understood which way the wind was blowing. "I have something to say," she announced, stepping onto the stage beside me. "Sarah asked me to lie for her. She wanted me to tell everyone that Ethan was abusive, that he'd threatened her. She was going to file false charges to get full custody of Lily." Sarah spun around, betrayal written across her face. "Marla, you traitor! We had an agreement." "The agreement was to help you get a fair divorce, not to frame an innocent man for child abuse. And it definitely wasn't to put that little girl in danger." Marla pulled out her own phone. "I recorded our conversation last night when you asked me to lie to the police. I was going to delete it, but after hearing those messages about the break-in..." She played the recording, Sarah's voice cold and calculating. "Just tell them you saw bruises on me. Tell them Ethan has a drinking problem. Tell them whatever you have to tell them, but make sure I get everything." The crowd turned on Sarah like a pack of wolves. These were her neighbors, people she'd smiled at and gossiped with for years. Now they were looking at her like she was something they'd scrape off their shoes. "You would have sent an innocent man to prison?" someone shouted. "You put a child at risk for money? Get out of our neighborhood." Sarah tried to defend herself, but her words were drowned out by angry voices. Rick was surrounded by fathers demanding answers, explaining in very clear terms what happened to men who threatened children in their community. I stepped back and let it happen. This wasn't revenge, this was justice. The community was policing itself, rejecting the cancer that Sarah and Rick had tried to introduce. Detective Malone appeared at my elbow, having arrived just in time to witness the confession. "Interesting block party?" he said dryly. "Just your average suburban gathering," I replied. "Those recordings will be useful evidence, along with Ms. Peterson's confession about the false abuse allegations." "I'm sure they will be." Malone studied my face. "You planned this whole thing, didn't you? The timing, the public setting, even getting Marla to flip on her friend." "I just wanted the truth to come out. Sometimes the truth needs a little help finding the right audience." Rick finally broke free from the crowd and ran for his car, but not before Tom Martinez accidentally bumped into him, sending him sprawling into the dessert table. He came up covered in chocolate cake and fruit punch, his expensive clothes ruined, his dignity in tatters. "Oops," Tom said with a grin. "Sorry about that." Rick limped to his car and drove away, leaving Sarah to face the mob alone. She looked around desperately for support, for anyone willing to take her side, but found only hostile faces and disappointed stares. "This isn't over, Ethan," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is," I replied. "You just don't know it yet." Sarah gathered what remained of her dignity and walked toward her car. The crowd parted to let her through, but not before making their feelings clear. "Don't come back," Mrs. Peterson called out. "We don't want your kind in our neighborhood," someone else added. As Sarah's car disappeared down Maple Street, the crowd began to disperse. People patted me on the back, offered support, promised to testify if needed. Lily ran up and hugged my legs, not understanding the adult drama but sensing that Daddy had won some kind of important victory. "Are the bad people gone, Daddy?" she asked, looking up at me with those innocent green eyes. I picked her up and held her close, looking out over the park where my neighbors were cleaning up the debris of my old life. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and court dates and custody arrangements. Tonight, there was just a father and daughter, safe in their community, surrounded by people who understood the difference between right and wrong. "Yes, Princess," I said, kissing her forehead. "The bad people are gone." Detective Malone approached one more time as I was packing up our picnic supplies. "For what it's worth, Cole, I think you did the right thing. Maybe not the legal thing, but the right thing. Sometimes they're the same thing, and sometimes they're not. You walked a fine line here." The only line that mattered was the one around my daughter. Anyone who crossed that line was fair game. Malone nodded and walked away, probably relieved that he wouldn't have to investigate any mysterious disappearances or unexplained accidents. Sarah and Rick were alive, unharmed, and thoroughly defeated. Justice had been served without anyone ending up in a body bag. As Lily and I walked home through our neighborhood, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. The war was over. The monsters had been exposed and banished. My daughter was safe. Sarah would disappear from our lives, probably moving to another state where no one knew her story. Rick would transfer his business interests and fade into obscurity, forever looking over his shoulder. Marla would rebuild her reputation by testifying against her former friend, and I would go back to being what I'd always been, a father who would do anything to protect his family. That night, after tucking Lily into her own bed in her own room in our own house, I sat on the front porch with a beer and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of victory. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing, neighbors talking, life returning to normal. The war was over. I had won,